Good afternoon. Hi, how are you? Are you fine? Okay, cool. My name is Ayabongwa Cawe. I wear many hats. I'm a member of the National Council of Equal Education. I'm also a technocrat in the public service. And this afternoon have the fortune of being able to quiz a few of our political parties on some of what their manifestos say about issues in particular in basic education. So we have a few of our parties here today. We have the Democratic Alliance. We've got the Vryheidsfront Plus, FF Plus. We also have Action SA, and we also have Inkatha Freedom Party as our guests. And you might be asking, why those? I already said earlier, the optics seem like a very selected sample. Not at all. The organizers had reached out to all political parties. And I think, as we can all understand, with the strains and exertion of the campaigns, many of the other political parties could not be here. But we'll certainly have, I hope, a very fruitful discussion and an informative one, because in the next over a week or so, we are all going to be heading to the polls. Many of those who are voting overseas are voting today in many of our diplomatic missions across the world. And so certainly an opportunity once again to better inform ourselves, as it is our civic duty as voters. So without much further delay, let me call up from the Democratic Alliance, Sergio Dos Santos, who's the Shadow MEC for Education. Please give him a rousing applause. So as Sergio comes up, Sergio's got about 5 minutes or so to just share some priority areas. Please, Sergio, take a seat. Some priority areas in the manifesto of the Democratic Alliance. I might have some questions and prompts thereafter. So Sergio, let me hand over to you. Basic education from the age of 7 through to the age of 18, at the most impressionable, but also at the most fundamental phase of the development of many of our citizens. What is the Democratic Alliance saying in its manifesto on this score?
All right, so thank you very much for having me, and afternoon to everyone. So we've got a failing education system. We've got a system where we've got almost 81% of our grade 4 learners that cannot read for meaning. We have to change that. We've got a number of learners across the country that cannot do well in numeracy. So there has to be a change to improve the quality of education. Where the current government, it's more focused on expanding education, which is equally important. But the quality of education is not what it's there. We've got poor management at schools, we've got poor teaching, unequal access to digital Wi-Fi. So there has to be some changes. So as the Democratic Alliance, and we use our examples of what we have done and achieved in the Western Cape. So what we are saying as the Democratic Alliance is that we need to ensure that every single learner across the country gets 210 full days of learning. Over and about that, the foundation phase, from grade 3 to grade 1, we need to have the first 2 hours of every single school day that is focused on reading and understanding for meaning, reading and writing. And then an additional hour in the day that is solely focused on numeracy development. So there has to be those type of changes. There's also the need to make sure that the quality of grade R is at a level that each learner, when they start at grade 1, they're already at that certain area. We also need to promote STEM subjects. We also, by ensuring that there's access to internet, we can also give the ability for all schools to have better access to Google for research processes, for STEM subjects and so on. But there's also the problem with regards to quality education and quality teaching. Right now, and unfortunately, we've got unions such as SATU, which is putting a stranglehold on education. They are promoting their own interests, sometimes with the assistance and the guidance of certain political parties. But also the ability for schools to employ educators is also stifled because of the SATU wanting to control that system. So in terms of the learner dropouts, when we're looking at the percentage given by national government, which is at 81%, the true dropout is actually at 55.1%. Now, what government is doing when it comes to matric, they look at how many matriculants wrote and how many have exited the matric system. But when you're looking at the number of learners that had started from grade 8, and then looking at it at grade 10, and the number that has actually matriculated, that number becomes 55%. That's the true pass rate, because you've got a lot of learners that are dropping out of the system. So we need to ensure that we have a system where the learners get good education, and as the Democratic Alliance, we want to reduce that number by 10% annually, to ensure that the learner dropout, the true learner dropout, is much lower than what it currently is. The problem with, as well, coming back to the grade 4 learner...
Maybe just on that, how are you going to do that? How are you going to keep more of these learners in school?
So we need to improve the education system. As mentioned before, we need to improve it. We need to ensure that the curriculum is expanded, especially when it comes to grade 10. But we need to ensure that the curriculum is expanded so that people that are maybe not necessarily more academically, that they can go into vocational subjects as well, giving them the ability to go through to varsity. When you're looking at TVET colleges, where a lot of these learner dropouts go through to TVET colleges, 60% of those cannot even find employment after that. And then there's also problems going into NSFAS, which we may not speak about it. But in terms of NSFAS, and it's also quite important, and I just wanted to mention it because I think it's, our proposed system is quite good. The current system that we currently have is that if you do not find employment after you have qualified, you do not need to pay it back. So we're looking at about, I think it was in the last financial year, it was about 41 billion rand that doesn't get paid back. So the system that we're looking at and we're proposing, as an example, we're looking at a tier system. So a household income from, say, 0 to 350,000 would get full scholarship. And then from 350,000 up to 650, it would be 66% and so on. So we need
on a kind of what? Cascading scale,
yeah.
Basically. Okay.
So the poorest of the poor would get a full scholarship. And then as the annual income increases in terms of the household.
Okay, so Sergio, we're out of time. I also kind of gave you a Marcella point there because we're not talking about higher education today. But I'll certainly accord the other parties the same. But thank you very much for that point. And also, I guess, on your response about how we keep more of the learners in school. Just maybe one question. The point you raise about SATU is often made in the discussion synonymous with absence of a performance management framework between the state as the employer of teachers and the teachers themselves. Just some thoughts on not only the SATU issue, I don't know how you would deal with that, maybe you might want to touch on that, but also how you would govern a performance management contract between teachers as employees, and I guess the government at multiple levels as the employer.
So what we are proposing, and with the poor quality teaching, so we're proposing that we test the teacher competence after they have after the initial training. Also introducing an independent evaluation, national evaluation after grade 3, 6, and 9 to evaluate the quality of education that we are receiving. Also, the different interventions that are needed in different areas. So, as an example, when we're looking at the new Bella Bill or the Bella Act, it was just passed yesterday, it kind of wants to take powers. This
is the language issue, yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
So that's as well. But it's also wanting to centralize what happens in different schools and in different provinces. The problem with that concept is that a school in Gauteng may be very different from a school in Limpopo. A school in Houghton may be very different from Shoshanguve. So there has to be some sort of system that we understand the community, the SGBs, which are actually elected by the schools, by the community and the parents, that actually have a better say as to what is happening in terms of...
so you want a much more federalist arrangement.
Correct.
Okay, maybe last question we have. How are you going to fund the Wi-Fi in the school?
The Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
so that is something that is already been rolled out, like in Gauteng and in the Western Cape, we have been rolling out the Wi-Fi access. So
wait, is that different to SA Connect? Or?
No, there's different partnerships. So if you're looking at it, there's different partnerships. I know of schools in the south of Johannesburg that I think it's Vumatel or Fox or something like that. So there's different...
So the private sector funds it?
Private sector also comes in. So that is basically what we want to look at. Is it expanded into all the schools, but also looking at collaboration from independent organizations that can assist with that type of funding.
And what does the private sector get in return?
Private sector, they get advertising. They get advertising.
All right.
Now, look, it's also the organization's ability, what's generally called the triple bottom line, is what do you give back to society? So that's something that we really need to inculcate in South Africa and ensure that when these independent organizations, such as collaboration schools, they also get something out of it.
Okay, Sergio, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Please give Sergio dos Santos a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sergio.
Thank you so much for
And all of the best with the campaigns. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
So at this stage, allow me to call up from Action SA, Me Peggy De Bruin, former MMC for social development in Tshwane, and also a former educator herself. Please give her a rousing applause.
I'm in the hot seat.
You're in the hot seat. Hello, ma.
Hello.
Okay. I like the tribute to the party colors.
Had to do it.
I love it. I love it. Please
Had
give
to do
Mama a
it.
round of applause.
My bosses are watching.
Peggy, same question I posed to Sergio. What does the manifesto of Action SA have on offer for the basic education sector and all of the stakeholders in that sector?
Yeah, as Action SA, we feel that there's actually a lot to be done, a lot to be improved. And we're not taking away what has already been done, but there's still a lot to be done. My starting point would be even the curriculum. The curriculum is very wide and leaving little space for, depth. I'm a teacher, I'm a former teacher, where you have to chase the ATP and, the mixture of our classes where you have learners who are not equally gifted. So I think if we were to trim down, I think COVID to a certain extent did help us in trimming down the curriculum, because then it leaves the teachers burdened. That's one of the things that we really have to look at, and we strongly feel that we also have to reintroduce teacher training colleges. I'm a product of Transvaal College of Education, where what we did most of the time was, to be taught on how to teach. But these days, you'd find someone who did HR, then having to do a year's course so that one can get into the classroom. And I think that's where, I strongly feel that if it's not broken, why fix it? Why did we even have to close the teacher colleges? So that's one of the things that we have to look at. And we're looking at also psychosocial support for learners. I've taught a lot of learners, and I was not empowered to even identify their learning disabilities. And the sad thing is that these learners have to be retained in grades, because the teacher doesn't even understand. And then you refer these cases to the district. The districts don't have education psychologists. That's one thing that we really also have to prioritize, honestly, and we feel that that's one area that we're also going to focus on to make sure that children are given attention and these disabilities are identified at an earlier stage. Even at ACD level, why not? So that then we stream them accordingly to where they should be. And obviously the pass percentage. Pass percentage is something that we're also going to focus on, depending on the subjects, especially critical subjects, We know mother tongue is a bit higher than the other subjects, but feel that if we encourage our learners to be focusing on getting 30% for argument's sake, we're not doing justice. It's like we're just pushing quantity instead of quality. So that's another thing But I know there are challenges. As a former teacher, I know there are challenges, and they need to be obviously addressed. Another area that I think we're not focusing on that much, which is also disadvantages as a party, our learners, is also the neglect of extracurricular activities. I specialized in English and physical education, and it was so sad to see teachers not interested in even doing some of these extracurricular, activities. But when it's time for, IQMS, when we have to check our performance, we always say, I do netball, I do that. So I think that, Department of Education at provincial level, national level should start reviving school sports. Some of these learners are not academically gifted, but are gifted in other areas, but we're not giving them enough support, And I'll also touch on the influence of unions. I think we need a situation whereby we don't have a situation, actually avoid a situation whereby unions have more of a say in terms of promotion of managers, we see it a lot. We see it a lot in schools, and we will find that schools are deprived of the real people, the right people who would be able to lead such institutions. So unions should be focusing on policies and other things more than the appointment of managers. We know what is happening in schools, and I don't even want to name a certain union, but that is the practice, and we need to move away from that and make sure that when we even appoint principals, we get people who have done, management of institution courses, for instance, know how to manage these institutions. So like I said, there's a lot to be done. Infrastructure, there's still a lot to be done. You go to school, some schools, you find that there is most of the schools don't even have proper labs, science labs, libraries. Most of these schools don't have those. I know it's a tall order, but we have to start somewhere in making sure that, especially schools in the disadvantaged areas, we know they are obviously classified according to the quintiles. And some are lucky to go to the former Model C schools where they find that the infrastructure is okay. I mean, there are schools where there are no sports facilities. There are schools where children still use pit latrines. We see children falling into. So these are, like I said, there's a lot, even in terms of infrastructure, which needs to be done and cannot be done overnight, but we need to start somewhere in addressing some of these issues.
All right, Mme. Thank you very much for some of those responses. And maybe my one question would probably be around the funding elements. We saw the other day a massive protest by social workers, and one of the placards said, we need more social workers in schools. To your point on psychosocial challenges and the need for educational psychologists. And yet, if I look at it from a budgetary perspective, over the last decade or so, if I account for inflation and population growth, there's actually been a decline in some of the allocations in our macro-fiscal framework to education, in a context where some of the class sizes have been getting bigger. So where are we going to find the money for some of these things? The kind of social workers, the educational psychologists, the school fields, where's the money going to come from?
We really have to stimulate the economy for starters and encourage investment, and also proper allocation and proper management of funds. Maladministration is also a problem. So at times we say there's no money, but there could be money somewhere. So we have to look at the budget, the allocation, the rollout, Like I said, it's not an overnight thing, but it's something that we really have to do. We know we need a healthy economy for us to run a government, for us to have a healthy education system. So something needs to be done. And that's why we should go back to the drawing board and say, how do we then stimulate the economy so that we can address some of these issues? Because education cannot suffer because there's no money.
Yeah. Mpegi, you also raised the other issue of the role of trade unions in the appointment of specific educators in the kind of system. It might be senior management teams and so on. But also, I guess the other element related to that would be their role in disciplinary mechanisms. So if we're assuming there's a performance management process, it must have some element of a disciplinary intervention and so on. How would you change that? Is that something at the level of a regulation, or is it at the level of the relationship between the district office and the leadership core in a school?
I feel that there has to be consequence management everywhere, even in education. And that is why we have, because one of the rules of the unions is to even represent educators whenever
There's a disciplinary hearing,
yeah, you know. So there's a need for that, but then also to make sure that there's action being taken, you know. We don't just have a consequence management as in a term that there will be disciplinary, you know, action taken, neither because of the relationship that we see, obviously, between some of the officials and the unions. We end up with lack of action in terms of, you know, teachers being taken to task. But I can say that we have seen a shift in terms of, you know, action being taken on a lot of things that we see. We've seen learners being impregnated by educators in the past, and then nothing was done much. So I think we need to actually zoom more into some of these things and also involve parents as stakeholders. Because if we are going to allow the education department, the unions, to handle some of the things, but without empowering the parents through the SGPs, because we do have SGPs.
And the community,
You know, the involvement of the community, and also educate the parents in terms of knowing their rights and the rights of their children. You know, a lot of communities need education in that regard.
Sure.
You know, so that we move away from people getting away with a lot of, you know, unsavory behavior, and then there's no consequence management.
Sure.
Wherever there is no consequence management, there can never be performance, or there can never be, you know, not that you instill fear in people, but people have to know that there is, you know, there's always a consequence for one's actions.
All right. Let's leave it on that point of actions. That is Action SA.
Thank you so much.
Peggy, thank you very much for your time and for joining us. Please. Thank you very much, Mme. So that was Peggy, the brain, former MMC for Social Development in the Tshwane Metro. Allow me at this stage to call up from the Vryheids Front Plus, the Freedom Front Plus, Mr. Jaco Mulder, who's the premier candidate for the province of Gauteng, and also the education spokesperson for the Vryheids Front Plus. Thank you very much. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Yes, please give Mr. Mulder a round of applause. Thank you. Mr. Mulder, I guess the question is the same, perennial question. What in the manifesto of the Vryheids Front Plus, which I read earlier and covers a wide ambit of issues, would you like to lift up this afternoon for this audience?
Thank you for the opportunity and a good afternoon to all. I must say that I'm actually standing in for Dr. Weinhard Boshoff, who's actually our education spokesperson.
So you are the sub-spokesperson?
Yes, I'm standing in for him. I'm also a member of parliament. We're colleagues there. Okay, as far as education is concerned, the Freedom Front Plus is very concerned about unions. I've heard that we talked about trade unions. And the devastation and the detrimental effect that that's got on schools. Now, a school is supposed to be a place of safety, not a place for looting. So the Freedom Front Plus suggests that we replace the trade unions with a arbitration and conciliation system that could be used to sort out those sort of problems. And then the second thing that we want to mention is the high fallout or figure that we've got with our schools, and we propose community and parent-driven mother tongue education schools, which can be provided for in the system. We know that the lack of mother tongue education, especially as from grade 1 onwards, is having a really negative effect on people's, especially, well, even in tertiary education. So community-based schools where you actually you benefit the child, not a system, education system. And then thirdly, the Bella Bill is actually moving in the opposite direction of what the Freedom Front Plus stand for, taking away the decisions of language and cultural and spiritual policies, as well as access away from the school into the education department. So we've got a problem with that. And then lastly, let me mention the whole idea of control. At the moment, provincial departments of education are actually providing education, and they are also on the control side, and we think there must be an independent body who actually controls, oversee education and the quality of your education, something that Umalusi most probably can fulfill. So just let me keep it up with that.
Okay,
first.
all right. Let's start on just on that point of the evaluation. I mean, what about the functioning of Malusi as a, I'm not sure if it's a Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 entity, to you at the moment feels inadequate?
Look, they should have a bigger role to play as far as the evaluation of quality education is controlled. Much law is, there should be, yeah, at the moment the Department of Education is also fulfilling a part of that role. I think it should be sought out to institutions like Umalusi in total.
I'm a parent. Just as an example, what is Malusi's role now, currently, in the system? Like, so the education department, I assume, sets the scripts.
Yes.
The children write the exams. The teachers, some of them mark the scripts. And Umalusi, I assume, is a quality assurance body.
Yes.
What do they do now that you feel, yes, is necessary, but not sufficient to get the outcomes you want?
Okay, there should be more of an alignment between the education department and themselves, because yeah.
Okay, all right. Then the other point you were raising, just on trade unions, because it does seem to be a common thread, and I certainly note that. It seems to me in your formulation, and you must clarify it for me, you want them to be designated, the teachers that is, as something atypical or typical to an essential service, with some restrictions on their bargaining and associational rights. Just your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say restrictions. I would say alternative system. And like I said, schools should be places of safety in education. If we mess around with that, we've seen what the results are. So we'll need alternative systems to settle disputes, other than what the trade unions are doing at the moment. Because what they're doing at the moment, they leave a legacy of destruction.
So you're proposing arbitration councils.
That's correct, yeah.
How would that process be different to the current systems for resolving wage and other disputes?
Well, there wouldn't be a trade union that actually loots schools, for instance. It would be a more peaceful system than a trade union, because lots of the trade unions are actually hiding behind the members, and they are causing, they're into power struggles as well. So you won't have that.
Last question on my end, Meneer. The Bella Bill. What would you say to somebody who says language in this country still very much in the education sector is a proxy and might be kind of synonymous with uneven distribution of facilities? Mepegi earlier spoke about there not being labs. But if one were to survey a lot of the kind of dual medium and Afrikaans schools, many of them, because of the history we come from, would have that infrastructure. Many South Africans are saying they want their children to go to those schools. What's your thoughts on how it is that this bill is formulated, that you take issue with in that regard?
Unfortunately, it all has to do with politics, like we've had in this province. The very premier of this province, Mr. Lesufi, when he used to be the MEC of Education, he targeted schools, single medium language schools, for so-called transformation. But the real reason why he did it was because the Department of Education in Gauteng did not build new schools. And I know it because I used to serve in the Gauteng legislature, and I used to be a member of the Portfolio Committee for Education. If you go on oversight visits to townships and everywhere, you'll find that there's not sufficient schools. So what they do is they go
But
to
there are
schools.
schools closing in townships because people want their children to go to town.
I understand, but they're not providing schools, even where it's needed. So what they rather do is They target single medium schools who are actually working, forcing them to become double medium schools, but for a political reason, not for the right reasons. That's what I mean.
So I hear that, Meneer, but I think the point I'm trying to raise is that there's an observation of township schools closing because they don't have enough children occupying desks in those schools. And that is because the parents are opting, because of perceptions of better quality infrastructure and facilities, to take them to schools that are in the towns, some of which ostensibly are Afrikaans medium or single medium schools. So that's the point I'm trying to raise. Now, you are saying we need to build more schools in the townships. What about the public investments that have already been made in the single medium schools?
Okay, let me go back. Something that I said in the beginning is that we need people who receive mother tongue education, regardless of what the language is. Let's take English and Afrikaans, for instance. They've got a huge advantage over other children. That's true. So why don't we give people or children the opportunity to get mother tongue education, whatever their mother tongue is? And that's why I mentioned in the beginning we need community and parent-driven based mother tongue education to actually provide for that. And it will be to a huge benefit of all children, regardless of what their mother tongue is.
Sure. How would that work in multicultural versus monocultural spaces? So in my township, say in Esbeleni, say they are, maybe that's not a good example. Say in Soweto, there are kind of 9 language groups. Would that mean that you need a school for Xitsonga, for isiXhosa, isiZulu, let's assume Shona, Sindebele? How would it work?
No, look, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. If you look at the models that they've got in the Netherlands and in India, for instance, India's got how many languages? We can certainly make use of those examples. With technology nowadays, it's quite possible to accommodate those children in one school, but not in one class. The principle is to enforce everybody to speak either Afrikaans or English is wrong. So people must be accommodated as far as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Yaku, and please give Mr. Mulder a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to be joined. I must firstly, I guess, comment on the age distribution of my guests. And I'm happy now to speak to a younger educator from the Youth Brigade of Inkatha Freedom Party. Her name is Ngosipila Zwane. She's also an educator in her own right. She tells me earlier that she has opted not to be a member of a trade union as an educator. Please give her a round of applause. I think we can do a bit better. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. Gospel.
Yes.
Gunja.
Ngiyaphila unjani?
I'm well, thank you. So, Inkatha Freedom Party, I'm going to come back to the issue you raised on trade unions, because I'm quite interested in why, as a young educator, you also don't want to, I guess, use your associational and bargaining rights to be under a trade union, but we'll talk about that. But EIFP, in their manifesto, what is on offer for many of the stakeholders in the system, be it parents, communities, teachers themselves, and more importantly, the young citizens in the education system?
Right. Greetings to everyone. I think, first of all, we can all attest that our education system is flawed, and it is then resulting in producing individuals that are not skilled. So therefore, us as the IFP believe that the education system needs to be restructured. This goes to even restructuring budgets, as we were talking, to say that we believe that in South Africa there is money, but there is no money, right?
So there's money, but
there is no money. So it depends on what they are allocating the money for.
Or
Then
priorities.
there is money, right? But then when we have problems in the education system, then there's no money. So also part of the IFP manifesto is restructuring the budget allocation for the education system entirely. Also, being a teacher, I can attest to this, that the pass rates or the pass percentages, the requirements that must be met by our learners are lowered. They say you need 30% for tourism, for example, or any other subject, and then you need 40% to pass English home language or isiZulu home language, and then FAL, you need 40%. When you go to university and you apply, then the requirements are something completely different. So which means that the education system is already failing our learners because it requires them to pass at 40%, but university, for access to university, then you are expected to have 60% for English, 60% maybe for maths, depending on the course that you're going to do. So that also is part of our manifesto. And we also believe that the responsibility of education should start when the child leaves the house. Then education then must provide scholar transport, free scholar transport for underprivileged learners. There are kids that travel 15 kilometers before they get to school. By the time they get to school, they're exhausted. If it's raining, they can't go to school because they have to cross a river. But if we had a system that provided them with alternatives, free transport, we're talking about free transport because some of these villages offer transport, but then it's according to parents that can afford the transport. We can give them bicycles. This is an alternative that if there is a road, then they can use roads and they can use bicycles, something like that. So if our education system, this is what we believe would benefit our learners and would benefit the education system. And also minimize political interference.
What do you mean by that?
For
By political
example,
interference, yeah.
obviously our trade unions.
Okay.
Right? Because they go as far as to, you hear that no, Comrade Mang Mang has an interest in becoming a principal in the school. Comrade, make it happen. Is he worthy? Is he qualified? You understand? So the minute I think we remove political interference, will be better for the education system. Because then it is people that are worthy of positions, qualified of positions, experienced of these positions. Then it makes sense. And then address underfunding by restructuring the education system. Now I'm going back to that point. Previous speaker mentioned former Education Minister Lisufi. He was looking at improving schools, which is not a bad thing. Good, right? But we are also looking at the fact that the whole curriculum itself does not serve the type of learners that we have now. We are looking at having, what do they call them? Ama2K. These are young kids that are in a system that values technology, they are exposed to technology. But when they go to school, we still expect them to carry 12 books. The same book I used, I'm an English teacher, I use the same book they're still using. So it's the process of rolling it out, you understand? So I can't be still using the same resources that they were still used in 2012, for example. Okay. When I was doing matric, it doesn't work like that because now the target audience is not the same. They are used to technology. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. So therefore, the education system must then accommodate that change, that we are changing as people. Therefore, the system must also change continuously and regularly. Also, the fact that we are then going to talk about now our parents opting for I'm privileged to have taught in both. I'm now a private school teacher. I left the public school system because it was frustrating. Okay. So our parents will take our kids to private schools because also they feel frustrated by the system as much as the teachers, as much as everyone in the system is. Public schools are overcrowded. You have 40 plus, 60, 75 kids in one classroom, one teacher. You are supposed to serve the needs of 75 kids in an hour, sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes 55 minutes. there's obviously a learner that is too shy to ask a question because there's everyone else, and then we are not going to be able to pick up on their learning needs and their learning styles and all of that. So therefore, that's why I'm saying that the whole system, the education system, is flawed.
Sure.
Yes.
Kosi Mpila, please help me here. And I think it's a question I'd asked also to Yaku. So this issue of class sizes is in a way a symptom of an underlying problem. It seems to me, I mean, to my earlier point, that you still have areas in the country where schools are closing because they say there's no children.
Yes.
And then you also have schools within some of the townships as well that are seen as kind of pools of quality
Yes.
and excellence. And you have class size issues and infrastructure issues and all manner of other problems there. How can politicians respond to that? Because we're in election now where politicians are going to go to provincial legislatures and to the National Assembly and to the National Council of Provinces.
Yes.
What can politicians do to reconcile that picture for us as citizens? Because it looks a bit bizarre to me that there are schools that are even going into a deep state of disrepair where
Yes.
people are doing all manner of funky things in those schools because there's just no children from the neighboring community taking their children to those schools. How do we fix that at the level of the provincial legislatures and national parliament, which is where we're going to be sending people?
Okay, I think standardized education. By that I mean, what happens in your quartile 5, quartile 4 schools must happen to the other quartile types of schools. I think my former colleague here explained that the categorizing of schools is what also makes it a problem. Because then we have schools that are former multiracial schools. They were well built from a long time ago, so everybody wants to go there now. Then the issue is, why not make sure that even in our rural schools, we have the same facilities, same infrastructure? You understand? So I think that's where the big problem is. Also the allocation. They've taken this whole grade R and grade 8 system to say you apply online and then your child is placed at a school that we see that it's either closer to you and all of. So they're trying. That I get the idea that we're trying to say, let's not move our kids. Let's place them closer to schools that are closer to them. But we have preferences, obviously, as parents. But the more we make sure that what happens on the right hand happens on the left hand, then we make sure that education is standard for everyone.
Don't we need money for that? It seems labs
Of course,
aren't cheap.
I told you that we have money
We
in
have
South
money,
Africa.
ne? Okay.
In South Africa, we do have money. It's just in terms of priorities. We cannot say education is not a priority.
Yeah.
We cannot say education is not a priority. And the fact that when we have these resources, how are they maintained and how are they allocated?
Two things that you spoke about, which I think are critical, I want us to touch on quickly. And we're going to get a response from one of the trade unions, so there's also that coming. On scholar transport, which is also a big issue, certainly in many of the rural areas we come from. Where are we missing it, according to Ingata, on this question? Because it seems to me, I understand there's a grant that comes from national that cascades down to provincial authorities, who then manage a series of service providers, much similar to the passenger operating grant, passenger bus operating grant. Why is it that in provinces like the Eastern Cape, we are still getting a situation where, service providers are not paid and therefore withdraw services? And what would Ingata do about that?
I think the biggest response to this is corruption. When someone is allocated to make sure that the resources that are there in the department go to the right people and that procedure is not followed, then that becomes a problem. As you are saying that money is allocated, then it does not get to where it should go. That's our biggest problem. That's why I said we have money, but we don't have money.
So what are you going to do differently?
Then Inkatha is trying to make sure that by all means that, for example, if we have projects that should go to the people, they are not managed as tenders. Because then that's where the problem starts.
So you would insource the entire...
Yes.
You would nationalize scholar transport.
It becomes a government thing. It doesn't become like a thing that now you can come bid. Then, because if I'm your friend, I'm like, friend, make sure I get it. But if it's something that we say, let us outsource resources and then we make sure, then it's sorted.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Last one, you spoke about curriculum reform earlier, on,
Yes.
which I think is an important point.
Yes.
But there are schools of specialization. There's one not far from where we're sitting now, in this province, that have been tooled appropriately to be schools targeted at, say, aviation, mechanical engineering, and all of that. What about those do you find problematic that you would change?
I'm going to make an example. I taught at a technical high school.
Okay.
So this is a school of specialization. Not everybody goes there, except for kids that are into EGD, electrical technology, and all of that. So such schools are not well maintained. You find that it's a big school. It doesn't even have a huge population, but there are not enough resources. Like Mem was saying, we don't have labs, then equipment is not, then it has a disadvantage of some sort that when your child goes to that school, it's a fee-paying school. They make sure it's a fee-paying
So you're
school.
excluding those who can't pay,
Yes,
yeah,
those who can pay. Also, there's equipment that you need to buy a child to go into the. You don't get it for
T-squares,
yes. You
EGD,
don't get it
okay,
for free.
yeah.
So then it excludes certain people from going to those schools. So until that is fixed in our system, to say even the poorest of the poorest kids can go anywhere they want, then our education system would have been like proper.
Nkosiphile's one, ngiyabonga dadewethu. Thank you very much.
Kubonga mina.
Please give Nkosiphile a round of applause. Thanks,
Thank you.
man.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think you would have heard quite a bit about trade unions. And I'm glad trade unions are going to get a right of reply, as we say in the media. I must say myself, it's quite concerning in how many manifestos the problem of education is put squarely at the hands of trade unions. Both of my parents are teachers and members of a teacher trade union. And I guess I'm quite puzzled about how we think about the constitutional rights to association and bargaining and how we balance that against issues of performance, but also processes of appointment and consequence management. So let me allow, I'm not sure who our representative is from the trade unions or which particular trade union. Please, Mama, sorry, sitting at the back. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot. My name is Mama, by the way.
Your name is Mama?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you
Mama,
for
thank
calling
you.
me
Thank
accordingly. I have so many questions, but unfortunately, I'm reprimanded to say I cannot ask questions, but rather put it in the form of a statement. So my question, first of all, I would like to ask, what was the whole purpose of this session here, the manifesto of political parties? Because in my small Anyana mind, it looks like they don't know what they are talking about. First of all, I don't know who employs the teachers. Is it the union who's the employer, or is it the Department of Basic Education? So I would like to understand whose responsibility is it, kahle kahle. I think we are losing the plot as also yourself, sir.
Also me.
Yes, the department employs teachers.
Yes, the state.
unions are there for representing the members,
workers, yes.
are there to represent the members in terms of labor on all other issues. And also when it comes to education, there's a lot of research that must be done. The curriculum is in its process of being strengthened, number one. We have a 3-stream model that's about to be implemented, number 2, which is aimed for learners who are not academically inclined to have a different pathway. So I think I will end there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mama. And even the bullet that was not meant for me, I will take. No, I'm being serious, because I think the issue that Mama is raising about different pathways is why I was asking the point on schools of specialization. But similarly, I think the point I was making earlier before your input is I would like, and I'm saying this as a citizen, I'd like us to caution against limiting associational and bargaining rights to create some kind of parallel system. Because if I'm allowed to join a trade union, as I was a member of in the broadcasting space, I don't think there's a reason why that shouldn't extend to my parents. So I think we must kind of balance those things out. But I'll take the bullet, Mama, even if it was not meant for me. Sorry, what was the trade? I didn't get your trade union, though.
Amandla.
Cawe too. I didn't
That's
get the
what
trade
to
union.
say.
Sorry, Mama.
That is the name of the trade union.
Oh, Cawe too.
Amandla. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
We don't want to waste your time, but also we just want to it's statements and it's not questions because time is against us. But also, I'm very much saddened, and I even question the manifestos and the type of people that listen to these manifestos, and what is the action they need to take thereafter. Because honestly, I'm also disappointed because people take the stage without having to research what they are coming here to talk about. The issue of saying, we have 3 streams already. Dr. Smelane, I feel very sorry for you because that is your passion. But now it seems like it doesn't exist. And also, people are not even backlashing at the unions per se, but people don't even know the role of Umalus. And they don't even know the role of SACE. So I think this is the research, and this is what people need to go back and research. And also, lastly, they might also research the role of the unions and what the unions are doing currently. Because earlier I was speaking to someone who was saying, honestly, she feels that unions have changed their landscape. But it's not about us dropping the toy-toying and whatnot. It's because we understand that we are past that. Now, this is where we are, and we need to move on. There's a lot that the union, and we have 5 unions. You mean all these 5 unions?
It seems there's a singling out of one. If you read the manifestos, there's one that's being singled out.
There's one that is being singled one, and that is why my colleague and I had felt that we need to respond. We
Thank
are
you,
from
Mama.
SATU, by
Thank
the
you
way.
very much. The South
And
African Democratic Teachers Union.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy you know the full thing. So I'm saying there are processes, there are policies. So, and the union, there are reasons for the unions to be there. Otherwise, people want to run a banana country. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please give the representatives from SATU a round of applause. And I think I will close it off here. I've been given strict instructions that we are late. So I need to hand over to my brother, Kayas Tole, so Sondela job. But I think that latter point is important. We have to always square all of these things up against the compact we all signed in the 90s, which is the constitution of this republic. And I hope that this session has helped inform some of the choices we're all going to make in the next few weeks. And from my end, thank you very much. And really appreciate the opportunity. Cheers.